a 16mm film taken in 1927 by Anna Webster and is being narrated in 1984 by her daughter Helen Wheelwright for Helen's daughter Gillian Feely Harnick and her family. The pictures you will see here were taken by my mother on a home movie camera, which was probably fairly new at the time, 1927. Mother was no expert when it came to making home movies, but she did pretty well. The pictures you're looking at now were taken out at a ranch in California called Hidden Villa, which belonged to the Duveneck family. And it shows a bunch of kids from the Peninsula School in Menlo Park who were probably out there on some sort of a field day. Shortly, the film will change to the Peninsula School playgrounds. The school was started in 1925 and had about 80 students ranging in age from kindergarten up through 8th grade. The school never referred to grades, it referred to the children's classes as groups, and there were altogether 6 groups. You will notice during this film that the titles don't all appear to be on the screen. Apparently, when one takes an old film and changes it to a video cassette recording, the entire picture is not included. Here is the old school. It was a mansion built in about 1895 in Menlo Park, California. And almost never used until the time the school took it over. In the pictures you're seeing right now, my brother David and his friends had invented what they called the Tunerville taxi. That's David who is pulling it. They charged about a penny a ride and apparently made pretty good money. Recesses at the school, as you can imagine, were a good deal of fun. On the left is myself, Helen Webster at the time. In this picture I am 12 years old. I'm playing with friends at being a cameraman. What we were actually doing was drawing pictures of our friends and then handing them out to the satisfied customers. That is my best friend Elizabeth Duveneck with the flower in her hair. She's the taller one of the 2 girls there. The smaller one is pouring hot water, presumably, into the camera, which is to develop the film, or at least so we seem to think at the time. My friend Margaret Goodrich is the girl on the right with all the fluffy blonde hair. The big boy in this picture is Francis Duveneck. He is the brother of Elizabeth. Mrs. Duveneck, their mother, was the director of the school and really the moving light behind the entire operation. My mother taught at the school for about 10 years. Mrs. Duveneck ran it for a few years more than that. Today, 60 years later, it is still going strong. There were lots of projects at the school. I don't remember this pool, but I do remember another project which isn't in these films in my particular group when we built a replica of the Panama Canal in the dirt, complete with cement sides and locks and little boats which we would make go through it, and I think it was probably a fairly correct replica because that was part of our geography and history lessons. This is one of the teachers. I have no idea what's happening here. That bunch of boxes looks as though it might be a Pueblo Indian establishment. We frequently built things out of old boxes. Note what might be an old upright piano crate way on the left. Whatever this is, it no doubt had something to do with what the kids were also learning at the same time in the classroom. That's my brother Cutler there in the foreground. Oh, here we have a dragon. We were getting ready for the school play. And that's me acting the part of Siegfried, hitting him with a sword. This is Elizabeth Duveneck acting the part of Brunhilde. We were doing a Wagner story of Brunhilde and Siegfried. I wish I could remember what the story was, but frankly I don't. These were ladies of the court, I guess. We made all our own costumes, as well as probably writing the play. This is myself, being Siegfried. And as Mother took this film, she was probably telling me to move around and look at her, and I can't imagine what other directions. Hold your head up, Helen. This is my friend Gerda Madvig acting the part of Loki, the god of fire. Mrs. Duveneck. Mrs. Duveneck again, giving directions about the play. That's the end of the part about Peninsula School. Just hang in here for a bit and another sequence will come on. That's Cutler and David. Our friends the Haweses came to call. Gordon Hawes and his wife France and their two sons, Harry and Fred, all visiting at 576 Girona Road on the Stanford campus in 1928. The Haweses owned a gorgeous green Lincoln touring car, of which Mr. Hawes was very proud. That's myself, Helen, patting the dog, Nancy on the right, David, the two Hawes boys, and Cutler. I guess we're looking at a basket full of something or other. Nancy's dog, Sandy. That's my father on the right, David Webster. At this time, he was the head of the physics department at Stanford University. The Haweses saying goodbye. Note the front seat of the car is wide, what was called a bench seat, so that Gordon could get in first and move all the way over to the left side under the wheel. Sandy was a mongrel dog, probably part collie and Lord knows what else. He came from the Palo Alto Pound. Nancy would have been about 14 when these pictures were taken. Cutler playing with Edna. Edna was about 7 or 8 years old. She was the daughter of our live-in maid, Mrs. Berta. Mrs. Berta was a Seventh-day Adventist and went home every Saturday. Every Sunday she came back, bringing Edna with her just for the day. Edna and Cutler were just about the same age. I was given a cat, what was called a blue Persian. I can't remember why it was named Prudy, but it was a very unsatisfactory cat. Really quite unloving, always got fur balls, always sick. And eventually, when Prudy went the way of all cats, it was not to be lamented. Look at my ghastly hairdo. I had one of the very early permanent waves. In those days they were given by a lady who wrapped your hair in about 50 rollers and put you under an electric machine with wires that went to each roller. And you came out as frizzy as a Fiji Islander. In the days when this movie was taken, little boys did not wear long pants. You'll notice that in all these pictures, David and Cutler have shorts. Mother used to buy their shorts, gray flannel, from the Hudson's Bay Company up in Vancouver, British Columbia. Nancy was the athletic one in the family. She's the one who rode horses and played tennis and did all those things. David and Cutler and their friends made a road, a narrow path that went down the hill by the side of our driveway at 576 Girona Road. And here they are playing at having wrecks. Dick Lee and Kelsey Robinson. These pictures were taken at what at that time was the head of our driveway. It's now a road, part of the Stanford University road system, but in these days our house was the furthest one built out, and that was our private driveway. Here's Elizabeth Duveneck playing with the Duveneck Scotties and their puppies. Cutler playing with his friends. This was a dry creek bed that was out behind our house on the Stanford campus. It was a great deal of fun. Actually, it was a lot more fun when it was wet and muddy. Then one could slide in the mud. But Mother, who was probably taking these pictures, didn't like to get out in that kind of weather, I guess. Cutler is on the left. And here's Helen being outrageously self-conscious. In these scenes, Helen is enjoying parading around in a white dress that probably belonged to her grandmother or a great aunt. Our mother kept what we call dress-up clothes up in the attic, and we would frequently put them on and parade around. That's Iola Page with Helen. Iola was a graduate student in physics at Stanford and enjoyed coming to the Webster house and occasionally doing silly things with the girls. Nancy and David go riding on Polo and Queenie. This is the back door at 576 Girona Road, and Nancy and David are loading their saddles into the family car. This was a 1924 Buick touring car, a very snappy model in its day. One could get a driver's license in California at the age of 14 in those days. Nancy and David are both wearing chaps, which were made of fur. They've just caught the horses, which were grazing out in the field. We kept the horses at a place called the Goodalls down near some of the Stanford buildings. This was probably about a mile from our house on Girona Road. The building behind Nancy and David is Encina Hall, the men's dormitory at Stanford. Again, there were no buildings on that land now. You wouldn't know it for the same place. Here they are riding up our driveway. And back down the other side of the driveway. Mother and the boys. That's Anna Webster, David, and Cutler. Anna would have been about 40 at the time these pictures were taken. And Nancy would have been 15. This marvelous gazebo was actually the discarded top of an astronomy building at Stanford. Mother had been allowed to take the old structure when it was given up. The family is having a barbecue in the backyard. Margaret Goodrich with the fluffy hair there. Nancy and Helen in the light dresses. Here comes the professor, hamming it up when he sees the camera. That's Anna serving, and in a minute she'll turn and speak to whoever is running the camera. If I could read lips, I'd know what she was saying. This was the top of the family grape arbor. I don't remember who all these friends are, but it was a great place to climb on because the grapes never grew properly, so we weren't hurting anything. We were just having a good time. That's myself, Helen, standing there. Chauncey Goodrich was a great friend of Cutler's. He's about 8 years old here. Henry Norris Russell was a well-known astronomer from Princeton University, a great friend of Father's from many years back, and he used to come out to Stanford on occasional visits. Here the two men are talking in our garden. Henry Norris Russell talked to Blue Streak. Although Pop seems to be getting a word in edgewise, it was usually Mr. Russell, Dr. Russell, who did all the talking. Pop is wearing what were in those days called +4s, golfing pants, although he never played golf. But they were very popular in the 1920s. Hang in here, there's still more to come. This scene was taken up at Red Roofs in British Columbia one summer. Pop is giving David his first shave. David has an interested audience. His friend Arnold Robinson is there in the background, and Orma Beasley. Helen kneeling in front, and Nancy way over on the left. These pictures are again back at Stanford at the Goodalls, where we boarded the horses. These are pictures of Cutler wrestling at Peninsula School, and they must have been taken a good bit after 1930 because he looks to be quite a husky boy there, maybe 13 or 14 years old. The photography is pretty bad. I don't know who was manning the camera, but just bear with it. It's hard to say who would have been considered the winner. Here's Nancy again on her horse. Oh, it's a May Day parade in Palo Alto. Again, I don't know the date of these pictures, but it would have been around 1928, 29. The whole town paraded up University Avenue from its far end to the Southern Pacific Railroad tracks. Across the tracks from the station was a building known as the Community House, which is where the parade usually ended up. And everyone in town seemed to take part. In those days, Palo Alto had already quite a community of Orientals. Nancy on polo. This was what the main street, University Avenue, looked like in those days, one of the bigger department stores. Here we are at the Southern Pacific Railroad station. Note the old crossing bar there. This again, of course, is Nancy. David on Queenie. And Cutler, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Cutler. Somebody's white rabbit. It may have been Cutler's. I don't remember his having one, but I guess he did. Yes, here he is playing with it. This is in our garden. Mother loved her garden. She grew these tall hollyhocks and larkspurs and roses and daffodils and all sorts of flowers. By the look of that automobile going by, it was probably about 1930 that these pictures were taken. I guess that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to rewind.